The air in the room feels like razor blades. He stands across the polished desk, the afternoon sun slicing through the blinds, striping his face in alternating light and shadow. His face is red, blotchy. His hands clench the edge of the desk, knuckles white. The sound is a strangled, guttural noise first, something halfway between a cough and a roar. Then it becomes words, fragments torn from his throat. You can't. His eyes, usually cool and calculating, are wild. Panicked. He looks like an animal caught in a trap it doesn't understand. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with desperation fills the space between us. It's done, Mark. My voice is quiet. Calm. The calm I've been cultivating for months, maybe years. It feels like a shield, cool and solid. Done? What's done? This is illegal. It has to be. You used the trust? For this? He lunges slightly across the desk, stopping himself just short of touching me. His voice rises, raw, cracking. That was our trust. Built on my work. It's my trust now, Mark. And yes, I used it. Perfectly legally. He stares at me, uncomprehending. The strips of light across his face make him look like a prisoner. A trapped prisoner. The building hums quietly around us, a monument to the empire he built, the empire I helped manage, the empire I am now dismantling, piece by careful piece. Outside the panoramic window, the city stretches out indifferent. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. We had a life that people envied. From the outside, anyway. Mark, the self-made titan of industry, sharp suit, sharper mind. Always 2 steps ahead. And me. The elegant wife, the quiet power behind the throne, running the household, chairing the right committees, hosting the flawless dinner parties. We were a unit. A brand. For 20 years, that was the story. Our home was a study in curated perfection. High ceilings, museum-quality art, minimalist furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. It was beautiful, yes. Impressive. But it was also cold. We moved through it like ghosts, 2 people sharing a space, a history, a name, but not much else. The early years had flickers of warmth, I remember that. Late nights planning, shared dreams, the thrill of building something together. But the building took over. The success became the point. The money wasn't just a tool, it became a barrier. Mark was always driven. Relentlessly so. I admired it, initially. His focus, his refusal to fail. But that focus narrowed over time. It narrowed until it only encompassed spreadsheets, deals, the next acquisition. I became part of the backdrop, a pleasant fixture in his carefully constructed world. I had my own life, of course. My charitable work was meaningful, my small private investments were interesting, a quiet rebellion against the scale of his ambition. I built a small, independent financial cushion, separate from the main accounts, just in case. A tiny lifeboat I never truly expected to need. My family had money, old money, quiet money. The kind that exists in trusts and foundations, managed by lawyers and advisors with hushed voices. Years ago, my father had set up a substantial trust in my name. Mark had been dismissive of it at the time, seeing it as insignificant compared to his growing fortune. He called it my play money. I never corrected him. I let him believe his money was the only money that mattered. That was my first quiet act of separation. The trust was managed by a firm my family had used for generations, discreet, efficient, and utterly loyal to its beneficiaries. To me, life was a routine, predictable and comfortable, if emotionally sterile. We attended galas, traveled to exotic locations, smiled for the cameras. We were the picture of success. The gilded cage was spacious, the view was spectacular, but it was still a cage. I felt it closing in slowly, year after year. The distance between us grew, not with arguments, but with silence. A quiet, polite indifference that was far more devastating than shouting. Then came the oddities. Small things at first. A new fragrance on his shirt, not his usual one. A sudden, unexplained weekend trip he said was business. Hushed phone calls he'd end abruptly when I entered the room. The little hairs on the back of my neck started to rise. My gut twisted with a familiar, unwelcome feeling. It wasn't jealousy yet. It was suspicion. The cold, logical suspicion of someone used to analyzing patterns, spotting anomalies. He started working late more often. The excuses became less convincing. He'd come home tired, preoccupied, but with a different kind of exhaustion than before. Not the weariness of hard work, but the tension of secrets held close. His eyes would dart away when I asked about his day. His touch, already infrequent, ceased altogether. The air in the house grew colder still. My first attempts were subtle. I checked the joint credit card statements. Nothing obvious. Business expenses blended into a blur of travel, dinners, gifts for clients. He was too smart for something so simple. I tried talking to him, gently at first, asking if anything was wrong, if he was happy. He'd brush me off, impatient. Just stressed, darling. Big deals. You wouldn't understand, a classic line. Tired, insulting, effective in shutting down conversation. The feeling gnawed at me. It was a physical ache, a constant pressure behind my ribs. I started sleeping poorly. The house felt too big, too silent. Every creak of the old foundation sounded like a warning. Every shadow seemed to hide something I didn't want to see. I found myself watching him, analyzing his every move. The man I had married was becoming a stranger, a complex puzzle box I couldn't open. One evening, he left his laptop open on his study desk. He was out getting wine for dinner. I stood in the doorway, frozen. My eyes scanned the screen. It was an email. Not overtly incriminating, but the tone was wrong.
Familiar. Intimate.
From someone named Celeste. It mentioned a shared joke, a plan for next weekend. My breath hitched. My hands trembled. I felt a wave of nausea, so strong I had to grip the doorframe. I closed the laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked away quickly, trying to erase the image, the name, the feeling of violation. That was the inciting incident. The crack in the facade. The moment suspicion solidified into the cold, hard knowledge that something fundamental was broken. It wasn't just distance anymore. It was active deception. Betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and internal turmoil. I moved through my routine like a puppet, pulling the strings myself. I hosted a charity luncheon, made small talk, laughed at jokes I didn't hear. All the while, my mind was a frantic mess of questions and fear. Who was Celeste? How long? How deep? I started searching more deliberately but carefully. I knew his habits, his routines, his blind spots. I found another email, buried in a folder he thought was secure. It confirmed the affair. And it mentioned a place.
A ski resort.
Specifically, a lodge they had apparently visited together. The language was sickeningly sweet, full of shared memories and future plans. My hands shook reading it. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to confront him with the raw evidence. But a colder part of me held back. What would that achieve? Tears? Promises? More lies? I needed to understand the scope of it first. The lodge. Why mention the lodge so specifically? The lodge became my focus. I used my own resources, separate from Mark's, to start digging.
Discreetly.
I hired a private investigator, someone highly recommended for their discretion. I didn't tell them everything, just that I needed information about a specific property, a ski lodge in a particular upscale resort town, and its connection to my husband. The investigator was a woman, cool, professional, asked few questions, promised fewer answers, delivered only to me. The initial reports were vague. Mark had been making inquiries in the area. Real estate listings. Nothing concrete. The investigator moved like a shadow, piecing together fragments from public records, local chatter, subtle inquiries. The tension during this period was suffocating. Every phone call, every email notification sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I felt like I was living a double life. The poised wife by day, the covert operative by night, sifting through encrypted messages, analyzing data points. The affair itself was a deep wound, a searing pain of personal betrayal. But the mention of the lodge, the real estate inquiries, introduced a new, chilling dimension. This wasn't just a fling. It was an investment of time, emotion, and potentially significant money in a future that didn't include me. The scale of his deception was growing clearer, and it felt not just like a marital betrayal, but a calculated move. A move to build a life with someone else, perhaps even to squirrel away assets. The investigation continued for weeks. The reports became more detailed, more specific. Mark wasn't just looking. He was negotiating. For a specific lodge. A substantial one. Pictures started appearing in the investigators' reports. A grand, rustic building nestled in the mountains, all timber and glass, breathtakingly beautiful, and sickeningly intimate. I could almost picture them there, building their secret life. The thought made bile rise in my throat. The pain of the affair intensified, layered now with a cold anger about the financial maneuvering. It felt like he was not just leaving me, but actively planning to take resources that should have been ours, built together over 2 decades, and use them to fund his new life with her. My early struggles had been about dealing with the emotional shock, the crumbling of my reality. Now, the struggle was about understanding the depth of the financial betrayal and figuring out how to protect myself. Rising challenges appeared. Mark became more cagey. He'd monitor my computer use more subtly. Ask pointed questions about my day, my activities. It felt less like conversation and more like surveillance. He seemed to sense a shift in me, a new coolness, a distance that mirrored his own. He misinterpreted it, I think. He likely thought I was just getting used to the indifference, settling further into my role as the quiet wife. He had no idea I was building a case. The investigator uncovered the price tag. $6 million. $6 million for a secret ski lodge for his mistress. The number hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just the money, though that was staggering. It was the audacity. The complete disregard. $6 million spent creating a haven for his infidelity, while our shared life was reduced to polite silences and separate bedrooms. That number solidified everything. It wasn't just a mistake, a moment of weakness. It was a deliberate, extravagant declaration of where his future lay. And it wasn't with me. This is where the midpoint shift happened. The pain was still there, a dull ache that would flare unexpectedly. But the cold anger, the sense of strategic necessity, began to override it. My focus shifted from why he did it to what I was going to do about it. My goal was no longer just survival, or even a dignified exit. It became about protecting myself absolutely, and ensuring he didn't walk away from this with everything, leaving me discarded and diminished. I realized then the full potential of my trust. It wasn't just play money. It was substantial. Managed independently. Untouched by Mark's businesses, his debts, his influence. It was my shield. And perhaps my sword. I called a meeting with the lead advisor for my trust, a sharp, elegant woman named Eleanor Vance. She had the quiet power of someone who moves vast sums of money with a single signature. I laid out the situation, omitting nothing. The affair, the lodge, the $6 million price tag. Eleanor listened, her face impassive, only her eyes reflecting a deep, cold understanding. "This is a significant betrayal, financially and personally," she said, her voice low. "Your father structured this trust specifically for your protection, independent of your husband's assets. It provides considerable latitude." I told her what I wanted. I didn't just want to uncover his assets. I wanted to protect mine, yes, but I also wanted to respond. In a way he would understand. In a way that would hit him where he lived, his sense of control, his financial dominance. Eleanor's eyes held a spark I hadn't seen before. "You're thinking offensively," she observed. "I'm thinking strategically," I corrected. "He has shown his strategy. Now I will show mine." The deepening crisis wasn't just the affair anymore. It was the realization of the financial entanglement, the difficulty of disentangling my life and assets from his without his cooperation, which I knew I wouldn't get. He was building his new life, while I was still trapped in the old one. The ski lodge purchase wasn't just a place for infidelity. It felt like a piece of the foundation for his future, a future he was actively building behind my back. I felt increasingly isolated. I couldn't confide in friends. Our social circle was too intertwined with Mark's business. Every conversation felt like a risk. I was living under a microscope, or so it felt. Mark's demeanor shifted again. From distant and secretive, he became watchful. He seemed to be waiting for me to break, to cry, to rage, to confront him. He wanted the predictable drama, the script he knew how to handle. He expected tears, accusations, the classic wronged wife. He expected me to be weak. That was his biggest mistake. My investigation continued, now working closely with Eleanor and the Trust's legal team. We delved into the structure of Mark's companies, his recent transactions, the specifics of the lodge purchase. It was complex. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, layers designed to obscure. But the Trust's resources and Eleanor's expertise were formidable. They moved through the financial world like surgeons, precise and invisible. We discovered the lodge hadn't been purchased outright by Mark. It was under the name of a limited liability company, deliberately opaque, its ownership structure pointing back to a series of holding companies. It was a clear attempt to hide the purchase, both from me and potentially from future financial scrutiny related to his other businesses. It confirmed my fear. This wasn't just a love nest. It was a calculated financial move. The resort town itself was upscale, exclusive. The lodge was part of a larger ski resort property, surrounded by acres of pristine mountain land, other luxury homes, and the resort's infrastructure. Lifts, restaurants, shops. Mark's purchase was significant, but it was still just one piece of a much larger puzzle. This gave us an idea. A daring one. Eleanor presented the possibility. The land surrounding the lodge, much of the resort infrastructure, including the crucial access points and ski lifts servicing that side of the mountain, were owned by a struggling development company. They had overextended, their debt was high, and they were quietly looking for a buyer for their resort land holdings. Not the ski operations themselves, but the underlying real estate, a distressed asset. The trust had significant liquid capital, more than enough. The opportunity was audacious. Instead of fighting Mark over one lodge, the trust could acquire the entire package of resort land assets from the struggling developer. The land around the lodge, the access roads, key pieces of infrastructure. It wouldn't just impact Mark's purchase. It would surround it, control it, make it subject to the new ownership's rules and fees. It was a monumental undertaking. Due diligence that would make Mark's head spin. Negotiations that required absolute secrecy. The legal team worked tirelessly, constructing a deal that was watertight, complex, and invisible until the very last moment. I met with Eleanor and the lawyers frequently, in discreet locations, away from my usual haunts. My life became a performance, a careful balancing act between maintaining the facade of the oblivious wife and orchestrating a multi-million-dollar corporate acquisition in secret. The pressure was immense. I felt the weight of it in every step, every breath. Pretending with Mark was the hardest part. Sitting across from him at dinner, discussing trivialities, knowing the magnitude of what I was planning. It felt like holding a live wire, trying to appear perfectly still. My internal monologue was a constant stream of strategy, fear, and resolve. Was this too much? Was I capable of pulling this off? The quiet wife, the charity chair, suddenly orchestrating a major real estate acquisition? But the image of the lodge, the $6 million monument to his betrayal, fueled me. It was a physical manifestation of his deceit, a tangible insult. I wouldn't just let him have it. The turning point was the day I gave Eleanor the final go-ahead. We sat in her office, the city skyline spread out below us. The contract for the resort land assets lay on the table, a stack of papers representing months of work, millions of dollars, and the fate of my future. Eleanor looked at me, her expression serious. "Once this is signed, there's no going back," she said. "The acquisition will proceed. It will be public knowledge eventually. Your husband will find out." I looked at the contract. I thought of the emails, the hushed calls, The cold silence in our home, the $6 million lodge he thought was his secret sanctuary. I thought of 20 years of putting his needs, his career, his image first. I thought of the future he was building without me, on a foundation of lies and stolen resources. "Sign it," I said. My voice was steady, stronger than I expected. "Let's sign it." The deepening crisis culminated in the waiting period. After the contract was signed, there was a period before closing, before the public records updated, before the news would inevitably leak. It was a tense, silent standoff that he didn't even know he was in. I continued the performance of our marriage, perfected over 2 decades. I attended events, smiled, nodded. Inside, I was a coiled spring. Mark seemed to relax slightly during this time. Maybe he thought he had gotten away with it. His trips were more frequent, his mood lighter when he was home. A sure sign he was spending time at his secret retreat. He was so confident, so arrogant in his deceit. It was almost pitiful. Almost. The day of the closing arrived. I wasn't present. Eleanor handled the legalities. But she called me the moment it was done. "It's official," she said. Her voice was neutral. "The trust now owns the resort land assets. The deal is closed." A wave of something I couldn't quite name washed over me. Relief? Exhaustion? Vindications? All of them, maybe. But mostly, a cold, quiet sense of finality. The die was cast. The trap was set. The news broke in the financial press first. A quiet announcement buried in the business section. A significant real estate transaction in the mountain resort town. A large tract of land and resort infrastructure acquired by a private trust. The name of the trust was listed. My Trust. Mark must have seen it. Or maybe his lawyers did. Or maybe someone from the resort called him, confused about the new ownership. However he found out, the reaction was immediate and explosive. That brings us back to the room. The polished desk. The slicing sun. His red, contorted face. You can't," he's still repeating it, like his brain can't process the reality. "That land, the access, the lifts, that's the whole damn resort. You bought the resort. The resort land assets." I correct calmly. "Not the operations. Just the land. And the infrastructure on it. The roads, the parking, the lifts that service that side of the mountain." He stares at me, eyes wide, disbelieving. He bought a $6 million lodge, thinking he was getting a secluded mountain escape. He was building his private world. He never imagined the ground beneath that world wasn't stable. "But why?" he sputters. It's not a question, it's a cry of pure, blind-sided confusion. He still doesn't grasp it. He thinks this is some random, bizarre investment. "Why?" I echo softly. The word hangs in the air, heavy with everything left unsaid. "You bought a $6 million lodge, Mark. For your mistress." The color drains from his face. The anger flickers, replaced by a dawning, terrible understanding. The trap. He sees it now. He sees the extent of my knowledge. He sees the absolute, irreversible checkmate. You knew." His voice is barely a whisper now. "I knew," I confirm. "I knew about Celeste. I knew about the lodge. I knew about your little secret life." He stumbles back from the desk, running a hand through his hair, messing the carefully styled silver. He looks lost. Utterly lost. "So you bought the whole damn place just to spite me?" It's still a question, but now it's laced with a kind of horrified awe. He's starting to connect the dots, but he still thinks it's petty revenge. He doesn't see the full strategy. Spite is messy, Mark. This is clean. Strategic. I lean forward slightly, my hands flat on the cool surface of the desk. My voice drops, low and steady. You built a $6 million retreat on land you didn't control. Land that is now controlled by my trust. The roads to get there? Trust property. The lifts you'd use? Trust property. That beautiful, secluded lodge? It's now surrounded, enclosed. And every single access point is subject to the terms of the new ownership. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. His eyes dart around the room as if looking for an escape. He thought he was so smart, so untouchable. He thought his money, his secrecy, his arrogance shielded him. He never considered that my quiet independence, my play money trust, could be wielded with such force. You can't just cut me off, he stammers. Oh, I can, I assure him. Or rather, the trust can. Subject to reasonable access agreements, of course. But those agreements? They're negotiated with the new owner.
Me.
Through the trust. He finally screams. A loud, animalistic roar of pure frustration and defeat. He slams his fist onto the desk. You conniving, you planned this. Every step. I agree calmly. Just like you planned your escape. He glares at me, his face a mask of fury and humiliation.
He thought he had the upper hand.
He thought he was the one making the grand moves, building the future. He didn't see the quiet countermove, the patient strategy being built in the background. He bought a lodge. I acquired a kingdom around it. The aftermath wasn't a celebration. There was no sense of triumphant joy, only a profound, bone-deep weariness. Mark's scream echoed in the silence that followed, then died. He stood there, breathing heavily, looking utterly defeated. The divorce proceedings that followed were swift. Mark, stripped of his leverage, his secret exposed and strategically neutralized, had little fight left in him. He wanted to make it go away quietly. The $6 million lodge, now a liability instead of an asset, a constant reminder of his failed betrayal, was sold. At a significant loss, I made sure of that through the trust's control of the surrounding property, effectively limiting potential buyers and driving down the price. The money recovered went back into the messy tangle of his finances, none of it coming to me. I didn't want it. The victory wasn't financial. It was about control. About proving that I was not a passive victim, but a force to be reckoned with. Celeste disappeared from the picture quickly. When the money ran into trouble, when the grand gesture of the secret lodge became a very public, very expensive mistake, the romance, I suppose, faded. I never met her. I never needed to. She was just another symptom of Mark's rot. Our home, the gilded cage, was sold. Its perfection felt hollow now. I moved into a smaller place, still comfortable, but without the echoing emptiness of the mansion. The art, the furniture, they were just things. The true assets were intangible. My independence, my resilience, the quiet power I had discovered within myself. The trust remained. It wasn't just a financial entity, it was a symbol of my autonomy, my ability to protect myself, and yes, to strike back when necessary. Eleanor and I continued to manage the resort land assets. We developed strategic plans for the property, turning Mark's monument to infidelity into a profitable, legitimate investment for my future. Every time a decision was made about the resort, a new access road, a change in lift operations, a development plan for the surrounding land, I felt a quiet satisfaction. It was a world he tried to build to exclude me, and now I own the ground it stood on. The pain of the betrayal hasn't vanished completely. Scars remain. The trust one had placed in him, the shared history we had built, are shattered pieces that can't be fully reassembled. But the consuming agony, the fear, the confusion, that's gone. Replaced by a cool certainty, a knowledge of my own strength. Sometimes I think about Mark. I imagine him looking at the news reports about the resort, seeing the trust's name mentioned, knowing that the world he tried to build with someone else is now controlled by the woman he betrayed. I picture his face, red and screaming, blindsided by a move he never saw coming. And there's a cold, quiet satisfaction in that image. Not happiness, but justice. A specific, financial justice that spoke his language. It was a hard lesson, a painful journey, from comfortable ignorance to dawning suspicion, crushing betrayal, and finally, cold, strategic victory. I learned that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous, that the greatest power isn't always loud and obvious, and that even in the face of the deepest betrayal, you can find the strength and the resources to build your own escape on your own terms. And sometimes, if you're clever, You can turn the ground your betrayer stood on into the foundation of your own new life. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.